Welcome to Titans of Terror, where we look at the men and women who have shaped the horror landscape. Today's subject, the master of horror, John Carpenter. John Howard Carpenter was born on January 16th, 1948, in Carthage, New York. In 1953, the Carpenters relocated to Bowling Green, Kentucky, when his father, Howard, took a job as a music professor at Western Kentucky University. John became fascinated with movies at an early age, particularly the westerns of Howard Hawks and John Ford, as well as the 1950s horror and sci-fi films. He began making short films with an 8mm camera before he even started high school. John enrolled at Western Kentucky University for 2 years as an English major, but wanted to study filmmaking. No university in Kentucky offered that at that time, so he transferred to the University of Southern California's School of Cinematic Arts in 1968, where he would ultimately drop out in his final semester to make his first feature film. During his time there, however, John wrote and directed an 8-minute short film called Captain Voyeur. This film was actually rediscovered in the USC archives in 2011 and proved interesting because it revealed elements that would later appear in his film Halloween. In 1970, John collaborated on a short film called The Resurrection of Bronco Billy, in which he helped co-write, edit the film, and compose the music. The short went on to win an Academy Award for Best Live-Action Short Film. John's first feature film was 1974's science fiction comedy Dark Star, made with writer and special effects wizard Dan O'Bannon. The film began as a 45-minute 16mm student project with a budget of $6,000. That version was completed in early 1972. The next year, an additional 50 minutes were shot with the support of Canadian distributor Jack Murphy to achieve feature film length. Through O'Bannon's friend John Landis, the film came to the attention of producer and distributor Jack H. Harris, who obtained the theatrical distribution rights. Harris insisted that cuts be made and additional 35mm footage be shot in order to bring the movie back up to a releasable length. The final film ended up costing only $60,000. The film follows the crew of a deteriorating starship 20 years into their mission to destroy unstable planets that might threaten future colonization of other planets. Dark Star was not well received upon its initial theatrical release. However, it became a cult hit on home video years later. For John's second film, he unleashed Assault on Precinct 13, a low-budget action thriller about a highway patrol officer, two criminals, and a station secretary defending a defunct Los Angeles precinct office against a siege by a bloodthirsty street gang. Initially, the film received a lukewarm response from critics and the box office. Heaps of praise came rolling in after the film screened at the 21st London Film Festival on December 1st, 1977. John has referred to this film as the most fun he has ever had directing. One of the film's distinctive features is its score, which John wrote in only 3 days. Literary critic John Kenneth Muir called the soundtrack a unique synthetic sound that is still quite catchy. John was hired by Warner Brothers in 1976 to write a script based on a true story about a woman in Chicago. He spent 3 months writing it and was offered a chance to direct it. The resulting thriller, Someone's Watching Me, premiered on NBC television on November 29, 1978. It's about a woman being slowly stalked to the brink of madness by a man watching her from the opposite tower block. The movie got John into the Directors Guild, and he also met his future wife, Adrienne Barbeau, on the project. Also in 1978, the supernatural thriller Eyes of Laura Mars was produced from a spec script written by John. This was John's first major studio film, as it was released by Columbia Pictures. 2 weeks after working on Someone's Watching Me, John started working on what would be his biggest film yet, and one he is still most known for today, Halloween. Producer Irvin Yablans suggested making a movie about babysitters being menaced by a stalker. He also suggested that it occurred during Halloween time. John took that and developed the storyline with then-girlfriend Deborah Hill. John agreed to direct the film on the contingency that he was given full creative control. He received $10,000 for directing, writing, and composing the music, retaining rights to 10% of the film's profits. He and his crew worked with a low budget of $300,000 and a tight shooting schedule. The film would go on to make $70 million, making it one of the most profitable independent films of all time. The film stars Scream Queen Jamie Lee Curtis, Donald Pleasance, PJ Soles, and Nick Castle as the silent killer Michael Myers. John has described Halloween as true crass exploitation. I decided to make a film I would love to have seen as a kid, full of cheap tricks like a haunted house at a fair where you walk down the corridor and things jump out at you. Halloween, of course, paved the way for a litany of slasher films and began an enormous franchise that is still going strong today. John wanted to try something different after Halloween, which led him to directing the made-for-television biopic Elvis that aired on ABC on February 11, 1979. This film was significant for John because it marked his first collaboration with Kurt Russell, a partnership that has lasted through many films. Elvis did very well in the ratings, even beating out airings of Gone with the Wind and One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. In 1980, John unleashed The Fog, a supernatural horror about a strange glowing fog that sweeps over a small coastal town in Northern California, bringing vengeful ghosts of mariners who were killed in a shipwreck a century before. The Fog is notable for starring John's then-wife, Adrienne Barbeau, in her feature film debut, and John's first collaborations with actors Tom Atkins and George Buck Flower. Jamie Lee Curtis also returned to work with John on this film after the massive success of Halloween. After viewing a rough cut of the film, John was dissatisfied with the results, so he reshot approximately one-third of the film. The film received mixed reviews, but was a box office success, and has since become a cult favorite. John immediately followed up with a science fiction adventure called Escape from New York, starring Kurt Russell, Donald Pleasance, Adrienne Barbeau, Tom Atkins, Lee Van Cleef, and Ernest Borgnine. The film introduced the character of Snake Plissken, a former U.S. Special Forces lieutenant who served in the Soviet Union during World War III before turning to a life of crime. The film is set in the near future of 1997, where Manhattan Island has turned into the country's sole maximum security prison. Current federal prisoner Plissken is given 24 hours to go in and rescue the President of the U.S., whose plane has been hijacked. If he is successful, he'll be pardoned. The film went on to be a highly successful franchise, including a sequel film, a novelization, comic books, and even board games. His next film was 1982's The Thing, based on the 1938 John W. Campbell Jr. novella, Who Goes There? It tells the story of American researchers in Antarctica who encounter an extraterrestrial life form that assimilates, then imitates other organisms. The group is overcome by paranoia and conflict as they learn that they can no longer trust each other and that any of them could be the Thing. The film stars Kurt Russell, Wilfred Brimley, T.K. Carter, Keith David, Richard Dysart, Charles Hallahan, and Richard Masur. The Thing is notable for Rob Bottin's creature effects, which were simultaneously lauded and lambasted for being technically brilliant but visually repulsive and excessive. In a 1999 interview, John said audiences rejected The Thing for its nihilistic, depressing viewpoint at the time when the U.S. was in the midst of a recession. It opened against the massively successful E.T. the Extraterrestrial, a family-friendly film that offered a more optimistic take on alien visitation. Luckily, the film has endured and has been reappraised as a milestone of the horror genre. Next up, John tackled a Stephen King story in 1983's Christine, a story of a high school nerd named Arnie who buys a junked-up 1958 Plymouth Fury, which turns out to have supernatural powers. Arnie becomes unnaturally obsessed with it, with deadly consequences. The film did fairly well at the box office, and like many Carpenter films, has become a cult classic over the years. In 1984, John directed Starman, a science fiction romance drama that tells the story of an alien who has come to Earth and cloned a human body in response to the invitation found on a gold phonograph record installed on the Voyager 2 space probe. The film received positive reviews but barely broke even at the box office. Actor Jeff Bridges, however, was nominated for the Academy Award for Best Actor for his role. John then pivoted a bit as he made 1986's Big Trouble in Little China, an action comedy fantasy starring Kurt Russell, Kim Cattrall, Dennis Dunn, and James Hong. The film tells the story of truck driver Jack Burton.
Who? Jack Burton. Me.
Who helps his friend Wang rescue his green-eyed fiancée from an ancient sorcerer named Lopan. The film tanked at the box office, leaving John to retreat back to making independent films. Again, this film has also had a resurgence over the years and is another cult classic. The next year, John directed Prince of Darkness, a supernatural horror film that follows a group of quantum physics students who assist the Catholic priest in investigating an ancient cylinder, which is the sentient, liquid embodiment of the Son of Satan. Critics and fans alike were quite split upon initial release, but this one too has become a bit of a cult classic. In 1990, John married film producer Sandy King. The 1990s brought John a string of unsuccessful films, including Memoirs of an Invisible Man, In the Mouth of Madness, the horror anthology Body Bags, a remake of Village of the Damned, Escape from L.A., which was a sequel to Escape from New York, and Vampires. John started off the 2000s by directing the colossal failure Ghost of Mars, before making 2 episodes for the anthology horror series Masters of Horror. His episodes Cigarette Burns and Pro-Life are both highlights of this incredible series. His most recent film, 2011's The Ward, a supernatural psychological horror, has also failed to make a mark. That same year, John narrated the video game Fear 3, while also consulting on its storyline. Since 2015, John has been focusing on making music with his son Cody and godson Daniel Davies. They release original synthwave style music as well as working on soundtracks. John Carpenter has had his hand in many classic genre movies. His love for cinema brings him to the forefront of horror royalty. Whether he's creating comic books, video games, music, television shows, or movies, John Carpenter's stories have endured for decades. The bat salutes John Carpenter, a true titan of terror.